good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Morning. I will call the, June 9th, 2022 meeting of the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee to order. First up is approval of minutes from our May 26th meeting. Any changes? If not, motion to approve. Second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Thank you. Public comment today?
And the public is invited to come up to the table.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's plenty of space.
All right, thanks. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Donuts and coffee, please, please, and cookies. Thank you.
And Director Garner, you're kind of leading us all the way through all of this, but
Yes.
the community event comments is where we're going to start off today.
Perfect. Well, thanks, everybody. And what I was gonna do is I'm just moving into, this is just a copy of the summary that we sent out to you. It's in your packet. I hope everybody had a chance to at least take a look at this. And I think the main thing I wanted to spend time during this discussion doing was just to get some of your comments or some of your thoughts about things after you've had a chance to read this. And primarily just to ease everybody's minds, I think it was about the first 12 pages where the executive summary, where really that was a summation of the comments and the summary or the survey reports. Our consultants basically collected all the data, not just from our meetings in person. They took all of the survey results, took all of the email comments that we had been getting, and just compiled all of those. The meeting that we conducted that was in Spanish was a little bit different. And so if you get to the back portion of all of the extra information, basically all the details, that's all in Spanish. I'm happy to figure out, we basically tried to follow the questions, almost the exact same questions that were basically asked in the English speaking meeting. There may have been just a couple that we skipped just because we just didn't have time. So, but I'm happy to, if you have questions about that or concerns about it, please let me know. But those comments and feedback were also captured in the summary. And then I had another just small group discussion the week after with another group of Spanish-speaking folks through facilitation with EBICS. And those comments are also captured in here. You can, I don't have the exact page, but basically there was just a summary of the discussion. So I just tried to kind of capture the main themes on that. But generally, I'm just curious to see, did anybody have any thoughts from what you read, from what you saw? We can go through kind of the main takeaways and just, I think the responses were fairly interesting. I think generally speaking, it sounds like and looks like we're probably on the right path with a few, probably some corrections that we might need to consider. But generally speaking, the intention of doing this and conducting this this whole process was really, are we on the right path? Are there other things we need to be thinking about? Anything that we should not be considering. And so this was really just an idea of just trying to gather as much information as we could so the consultants can start putting together those essentially just the core components of each chapter. And those are going to start, actually, they have already started coming to me and they will start coming to you very soon so that we can start getting your feedback on those. But generally, I just would like to see if anybody had any comments or anything that you wanted to talk about.
Just a general comment. It looked like there were about 89 or 100 survey respondents. And at our meetings, we had maybe 50 on each side.
Mm-hmm.
I know you made a comment about how hard it is to get people to respond, and I understand that. But anything else in your past experience we could do to try to solicit more input?
Yeah.
Does it seem like
is-
in the room I was in, there were a lot of us there. So
Yeah.
they diluted out that 50 to maybe 20.
Well, your comments are still important, and you were welcome to come there and share. I think what this process, I think what was helpful about it is while we talked about it and I wanted to solicit some feedback from you as we were developing the questions, I still wanted you to take an opportunity and actually respond to those questions on your own too. Your opinions are important, so I don't consider those any more or any less than the comments that we received. Community engagement is very, very difficult. And especially when it's something like a comprehensive plan, because it is vague. It's not specific to a property. So people don't necessarily have a vested, like, I'm gonna get involved with this because it's my neighbor kind of a situation. And also, I think the idea of visioning and thinking ahead 20 to 30 years is tough for people. It's tough for them because their current circumstances are they're either working, they're busy with their families, you have other things going on in your life. And so it is very difficult to get the community to get involved in this. And I've been a planner now. I think this is my 21st year of being a planner. This is the most community engagement that I have ever seen in any community I've worked in. So I want to commend you and also let you know that while it is disappointing that, you know, we don't have 300 or 400 people showing up at our meetings and we don't see, you know, 1,000 surveys, I have never seen it. It's just, it's tough. And so really the intention here was, let's try to get as many people as we can, but let's also try to reach out to the groups that we typically don't hear from. And that, I think, has also, we've been really lucky, and we have community partners here in Estes that are really committed to bringing people to the table and convincing them that it's worth their time. And that's, I think that's really how I would gauge the success of this, is that a lot of people have shown up that we typically would not have heard from. So that's good. And we really tried to diversify this with, you can do a survey. Now, I know that that survey was very, very lengthy. A lot of people came back and said, it didn't take me an hour, it took me several hours, because they were reading the content. They were giving things a lot of thoughts. That's important. I'm glad that they did it. In the future, I don't know if there is a way that we could have broken that out to have made it easier for people. We could have potentially broken it out by topic, and then people could have kind of opted in. But I suspect we may not have had as much engagement, and there may have only been engagement on certain topics that people wanted to engage on. And so I think the intention was, let's throw it all out there. Let's hope that people can take it. But what I actually did in the Spanish speaking meeting, we had copies of the survey that were out at the tables. And while people were in the meeting, they were filling it out as they were going, and they just handed them back to me. So we had about, let's see, 13 or 14 people that actually took the time to respond during that meeting. So whatever we can do to get people to engage, this is, and we're going to talk a little bit about this too, about the role of the CompPAC, just so I think we have a little bit more clarity with it. I don't know that, you know, that conversation has ever really been discussed heavily here. So I just want to make sure that we have a chance to do that. And that if I can help you to answer questions or just clarify that, we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Just a technical point on the survey. I took the survey, I didn't get all the way through it, so I opted out. When I came back, none of my answers had.
Yeah,
So I had to start all over again.
oh, I'm
It
so
took me-
sorry.
It took me about 3 hours to go through the survey.
I think if I don't remember if it actually said in the instructions that if you leave it, you can't come back.
No, there was nothing.
So I apologize for that. That was unfortunately the system that our consultants are using. It's not like a Survey Monkey where you can step away from it. It's in real time, and once you either finish it or you don't. But it's, you know, it's hard, and I apologize. I think that survey was just pretty unwieldy. Despite that, I'm really appreciative that we got many people that did take the time to actually fill it out. So, you know, over 80 people. I think that says a lot. Almost as many people that came to the community meetings. So I think that helps. So what else? What other thoughts do you have as you were, did anybody have a chance to look through the executive summary?
I didn't read the 132 pages.
I
got
didn't
to the
expect it,
executive
yeah.
summary, and then I went and checked some other specific. I wanted a little bit more detail.
Uh-huh.
I was I was happy to see that for the most part, people are happy with the language we've used. I think the survey was showing that. I think one of the difficult things for the future of this community is basically people said, yes, do it all.
Yeah.
Right? They liked all the ideas, and that's good for a vision. It's kind of good for the plan. It's going to be a lot harder in the execution of that and how we allocate those resources in the future. But right now, that understanding that the things we're talking about, people were behind, I thought was very encouraging.
Yeah, I think that's where I struggle too. It's like, there's like no stack rank, right? Yeah. It's like, which of those things is the most important to you, right? And so, without that data, it's like, yeah, let's do all of these things in whatever order you want to do them in. But obviously, we all know you can only do one thing at a time. So, especially since these are pretty big. So that's where I struggle.
After looking over the survey results, did you feel there was a significant difference in priorities between the Spanish-speaking community meeting and what you read about from the English side?
Yes and no. My impression, and I was, I think there have been some pretty strong themes that have emerged from a lot of the conversations that we've had that are really related to, we need to find affordable housing opportunities here. We need safe housing here. We are, generally looking for the same opportunities for their kids, same access to the outdoors. They are here by choice. They like the community and they feel welcomed, but they also, to some extent, feel a little invisible. And really wanting to be more involved. I think that was one thing that seemed to be very resonant through at least 3 discussions was we want to be more involved, and it's difficult because we can't always understand the material. It's not always produced in Spanish. And we want that to be a priority. We want to be able to engage. So that was something that I heard more often was a desire for advocacy. But then in the discussion on May 19th with the group that EVIX helped me to facilitate, a lot of their reactions were about how do we get people to recycle? How do we start composting here? How do we start reducing our energy consumption? So there are not a lot of differences, I think, when you start to think about what our human needs are and what we aspire to. It's just some of the cultural divisions and some of the things that have been challenging in terms of being able to find affordable housing that they haven't played as dominant of a role. And I think that is something that clearly stood out to me in a lot of the discussions is that they want to play more of a role in that. But yeah, it was surprising, and I was really pleased. It was actually kind of funny when I looking at, where was it? They were talking about how many people actually showed up, and more people showed up to the Spanish speaking portion than the English. And I was just really pleased with that because we don't often really get a chance to go out there and connect with people on that level. So I was really happy about that.
I had the impression that in that Spanish speaking portion, that there was a lot of talk about housing.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah.
That was a dominant thing.
Yes, that was, I think, probably the most dominant thing. But I think that that's also very similar to the conversations that we were hearing from the English speaking group too, is there's an imbalance here and we've got to figure out where our priorities are when it comes to that. And I think going back to John's comment of, it's kind of this, let's do all of it. Part of what we're going to be doing is that as we're developing the actual plan is trying to figure out how we calibrate that type of demand, trying to figure out how can we prioritize, what do we already do? And I think that that's important too, is providing some transparency to the community about what does the planning division do? What does the building division do? How is this already kind of built into our regulatory process or into our comprehensive plan that we're trying to keep our eye on? But what do we need to do maybe more of or less of? And I think that that's going to be the part that's going to be kind of tricky, and that'll be challenging. So we'll bring that to you. And I think those are going to be some of the discussions that we have is, these are aspirational. We're not going to be able to do everything. But I don't think that means we should take anything off the table, because that's going to be really up to the town to start figuring out how to prioritize some of those things if they haven't already.
I'd like to make a couple comments.
your question about how do we increase participation. Like experience here, it's just part of it. People are motivated, they really care about an issue, they show up. Calling the help. Thousands, hundreds of people showed up to these meetings. More people are showing up to speak to housing. I think that's telling you that that might be the biggest issue, even if the surveys aren't telling you that. So that might be a way to kind of help parse through this stuff. Is what are people actually getting out of the house and coming and talking to us for? That's more indicative, I think, than what the filling out of the survey.
Yeah, I think I think it's a really good observation, and I'm not surprised by that, because we have been hearing that basically as a drumbeat. I mean, before I joined Estes Park, that has been a priority. It continues to be a priority. So,
Well, it just seems like so many things flow from our economy. Built on housing, without the housing, you're not gonna be able to solve this, some of these economic issues and all these other social issues. So it seems like that's kind of sorts.
it is, and with that, come the intrinsic challenges with that, which is where, how dense, who can afford it, are we going to change anything to the current landscape? Are we going to be making regulatory changes? Are we going to dial back some of the requirements? I don't know. But one thing I guess I also want to make sure that you're all aware of is that the comprehensive plan is not going to answer those questions. The comprehensive plan is going to lay out really that framework for how we're going to try to address these issues. A lot of what we can do to address this are going to be kind of efforts that fall beyond the scope of the comprehensive plan. And when I say that, I mean our development code, when that gets updated, that's going to be taking a look at some of these things. The work that the town administrator's office is doing around housing has continued to be doing that. The work we do with the EDC, the work we do with the Chamber of Commerce, all of that work is going to be basically informed and guided by the comprehensive plan to some extent, and the community's priorities. But we're not going to say, okay, if housing is the problem, here's our solution in the comprehensive plan. It's going to lay out a number of strategies for how we can attack that. But that's not the job of a plan that big. It's never in the purview of it. So this is laying out the framework.
I think a lot will depend on what this Estes Park Task Force does with House Bill 221117, which could bring in several $1 million in cash to the housing issue. Also be a key to bonding, doing some revenue bonds, which would bring in a lot of money into the housing issue. And then who does that? Who manages that? We're going to have competing issues between the town of Estes Park and the housing authority.
I hope not.
I hope not too.
And that's not going to be a question that the comprehensive plan is
I
going to
know.
answer.
Well, I understand.
Yeah, I think what you're alluding to, Eric, is exactly the nature of what we do after the comp plan, and even while it's still in process. That essentially it's like flying the plane as you build it, because we can't just stop and say, let's wait. We have this needs assessment coming. We've got a housing strategic plan, the comp plan. Let's just not do anything until we get the answers to that. We can't. It's a luxury we can't afford. So we're going to have to jump into this and start addressing some of these issues. My hope is that the comprehensive plan and the work that we're doing helps to inform that, is informed by it. And so we're not just kind of operating in a vacuum, not aware of all the other tangential things that are happening that feed into that. But it's complicated. And, those are things that are going to have to get worked out. But they're good. I think they're good challenges. And I'm glad to see that a lot of things have started to evolve, at least, within the state legislation. At the local level, I think there has been a lot of initiative with that, there's a recognition that we have to do something to help augment this challenge, and we've got to do it with many more resources than we currently have. So it's a good thing that people are not ignoring it. But it's always going to be a challenge to figure out the logistics.
And that's what I think CompPAC needs to emphasize intergovernmental relationships. Not emphasize, but at least address. and make that goal.
Absolutely. And I
That
think,
way we don't have to.
and I think that is one of the guiding principles.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have them in front of me right now.
Yeah,
but
yeah. No, we've been talking about it from day one.
Yeah. Matt, you had a comment. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say something earlier. I know Eric, you and I, sitting on the Housing Authority Board 15 years ago, probably talked about education and addressing some of these problems and getting it in front of the people so they understand it. This community as a whole can address some of this. And we were struggling with that then. I think that is always going to be a struggle. But specifically on the housing issue, that conversation has changed from where we were 15 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. Whether that's education or the depth of the problem is increased to the point that people can't ignore it, I'm not entirely sure, but it is encouraging to see how that conversation has changed in this community in the last 10 years, 20 years, that now it is at the forefront and something that we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, actually, we were just talking about it in our office, that, and pardon, I want to apologize because I wasn't here when the last comprehensive plan was written. But I sensed that there was a different tone at that time around growth
Absolutely.
and development. Yeah. And I think that a lot of the way that we structured our outcomes and the things that we were looking for in Estes.
There was actually a citizens initiative that took the town at that time was going to build 57 units right over here. It was an initiative that came through and took the town. Citizens did not want any kind of housing.
And here we are. So, I mean, I think it's important to recognize with anything, a comprehensive plan, our development code, the will of the community, all of these things have gotten us to where we are. And so we really want to think about 20 years from now, knowing what we know now, what do we need to do now to get us to that point? And it's going to take 20 years of effort and vision and funding and partnerships to do all of those things. And so it's hindsight is always really, it's a luxury to be able to look back and say, why didn't we do that? But it just wasn't the consensus at the time. And so that's why it's really important that we get, the consensus that reflects the will of where we are today. Let's see where that takes us in 20 years. Recognizing there's gonna be a lot of change. So.
I think what I'm thinking about is like, if we're seeing like all of these things as priorities, obviously housing is a priority. I think we see that. It's like, how can we provide clarity in the plan? There's lots of smart people already working on it. I think what I have been coming back to, and this is just coming out of like my corporate business experience, is like, how can we create clarity with the plan to put some structure in there for collaboration? It's like, instead of talking about the importance of an issue in the plan, it's like talking about the process of how to actually get things moving. Because I think just because we got money coming in to visit Estes Park doesn't mean it's going to solve the problem. So it's like, I think if we could provide something in the plan, and what comes to mind for me is like strategic doing the work by Norris, like how can we provide structure in the plan where we can like say like, okay, like, if we were an enterprise, if we were a company, like we wouldn't have 20 years to figure this out, right? So how can we like help all these groups organize as the town and provide some clarity there?
Mhm.
And I don't know, that's what I keep coming back to, because I feel like, we can say that these are priority, but then to your point, like the town still has to figure out like what order to do them in and how to actually do all that stuff. But I feel like we should look for opportunities to provide some clarity there. And like, how do you actually get this stuff done?
Yeah, well,
Like, from all of our experiences, because we've all been in businesses and we've all struggled with this.
if I can ease some of your anxiety, what we are working on right now, just as this is not going to call it a side project, but it actually became a unique opportunity for us. The town went after a grant through DOLA to get funding to conduct an updated housing needs assessment and also create a housing strategic plan. So the consultants have been hired. They've kicked off the project. We're probably a few weeks into it right now. And what the intention is that as we are wrapping up the comprehensive plan, that housing needs assessment and the strategic plan will also be finished, and they will be incorporated into our plan. So that doesn't mean that somebody else is going to come up with all the answers, but somebody is there to be asking exactly those questions and to be putting some specificity to the framework. And I think it's going to be really important that our consultants come out and talk to this group and get your opinions. There's going to be a public process where they're going to be talking to stakeholders. And so if you do have ideas and if you have thoughts and suggestions based on your experience, I hope that you'll share those. It's going to be really important because that plan is going to be specific. And we're just going to be incorporating it into the comprehensive plan because it just happened to work out. So we're fortunate, but that's going to, it's going to take a few months of work.
That
Can
will
you
be
describe
before the
this?
end of the year, though.
Yes, they are planning to actually bring that to, I think they want to bring it to the town board around November. So it'll be very close, but it will have the time. Yes.
A strategic plan, you just mentioned that in passing. Describe that, who's putting that together, and how
So,
will it attach?
well, it'll probably be an appendices, an exhibit, whatever, an attachment that we put onto the comprehensive plan. But so the consultants are group policy. They also did a lot of work with us on the short-term rental vacation home fee study. So they've already had quite a bit of interaction and they have some familiarity with what the issues are up here.
Are they taking the comp plan into consideration of their strategic plan?
Yes, in fact, one of the sub-consultants that is on their team is a sub-consultant on the team for the comprehensive plan. And the idea there is that we want this to be a process that's knitted together. So including community engagement, including taking the data that we are collecting and making sure that they're using that for their planning process. It reduces some of the duplication of effort and also resources. That strategic plan is going to lay out a path for how we can achieve some of our housing goals.
I'm not saying to change the name or anything. You think the term implementation plan will apply? Does that kind of fit with what they're doing?
I think it's more than just an implementation plan. It's a strategic plan that would include implementation,
Okay.
but that will be in there. They're going to try to lay out some of the steps that we need to take.
So this is kind of hitting exactly what your concern is, right?
That's exactly. I know it's a lot of planning. This is the way things get done in government. It's just
Yeah,
not
and
quite
I
as
think
clear.
that's
Your
why,
20-year
so I
timeframe
mean,
is
that,
optimistic.
I don't know if who else, if anybody else is familiar with the strategic doing framework, but I mean, to me, like, so it came out of the Purdue Agile Lab. This guy had person, and the principle was that he took the Agile methodologies like we use to build software, right, and applied them to the community. Right? And so you go through this very iterative process where everybody that's involved is actually bringing things and doing things versus planning, right? You still need plans. I'm not saying that we don't need strategic plans, but it's like, it's kind of this process where we have plans in place and we're getting new plans. And we have a lot of organizations that are all trying to work together. And I have a feeling we're probably spending a lot of time in meetings versus doing, right? Where it's like trying to figure these things out and I think that's why I bring it up because it's like, that's what we do in software. It's like, it's like, how can we reduce the meetings and get them to the doing, right?
Except the only difference is that it's private money versus the
Yeah.
entire community's investment. And
Right,
so
and
there's a need for transparency.
Totally a need for transparency. And I think, I mean, like, I know that framework has been used in other communities that have solved this problem. We see a lot of communities with this problem that are not doing that. And I'm just bringing it up as like, I feel like we should look at communities that are doing things differently than maybe traditional, because it's like, the world is moving much faster, which is why the housing problems got so out of hand, right? It's like literally like the number of people that can work from Estes Park now is much higher, even though their company isn't here, right? I'm one of them. So like, I can speak to that, right? And it's like, we're pricing out the local economy, workers. And so what do we do about that? That's a pretty new thing. It's always been there in software. Now it's pretty much with the entire workforce, right? The Zoom town from the, phenomenon. And so I feel like if we don't react sooner, we will get further behind. That's just my
Yeah,
opinion.
no, I can understand that. I mean, I worked in Silicon Valley for 7 years, so I was in the heart of innovation. Housing is the #1 issue there too. So as much as we want an entrepreneur.
The nice part about Silicon Valley though, is that like, they have all the businesses. We don't have the businesses, right? Like, my company's not based here, right? It's based in Boulder, right? Which, that's fine.
Yeah, but what they also have that we don't have, or what neither of us have, is land. And I think that that's the problem, is when you look at the existing fabric of the community. And so, let's take an example, a very stable residential neighborhood, single family detached homes, 2-car garage, 1/4 acre of land, whatever. Once that's established, you can't fix that. You can't change that. And with that comes a perspective and a reliance on things are going to be like this because this is the way it is and this is what I bought into. So what a lot of communities are doing, and this is what not just California, but Minnesota, other states around the country have been saying is, we're not going to make this process so reliant upon government to try and solve it, local governments to try and solve it. So big state government is going to come in and tell you how to do it. And what big state government has said is you are no longer, you don't just have to build a single family house on a 1/4 acre of land. You can build a 4-plex on that and you can do it by right, which means it does not have to go through a public hearing process. You can go get a building permit and do it. Because what they've gotten to the point of understanding is that there's not enough land to meet the expectation and what people think they're entitled to. We just can't do it. We can't continue to build communities in the ways that we built communities in the 50s. And the predominant, I live in one of those neighborhoods in Broomfield. It's suburban. But we can no longer sustain that. We can't build to that. We can't maintain the infrastructure for that. And we can't afford to pay for it. And furthermore, families can't afford to live in it. And they don't want to live in those situations all the time. And they don't have the characteristics that lend themselves to that. And so I think what you're saying is absolutely right, John. Everything is evolving so quickly in terms of the demographic of the United States and people's preferences and what they want to do, that we have to be agile and we have to be able to respond to that. Still knowing that land is something we can't create. And we're going to have to get more creative about what we put on it.
Yeah, I think that's we have the great fortune of private markets here, right? And they're going to continue to build houses, and they're going to build up all the available land and houses. And my fear is that while they're doing that, we're planning, and then there won't be any land left for us to actually do any of the plans, right? So it's like we have a very constrained amount of resources because you're right. Once it's built, trying to like change it, it's hard.
Yeah.
Right.
I think part of the point that is a challenge here is that industry is moving faster and faster and government still moves slowly. And at some point, as government and resembling this remark, we have to move faster. We have to find a way to be more agile because like by the time we have all of our perfect plans, the plan was built for a world that existed 20 years ago that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And we already see that with our last plan. I do worry we're going to do the same thing with this plan.
Well,
I
no,
think
not-
one of the things that strikes me, and I agree with what's been said here, is that government changes every 2 years. In Estes Park. 2016 housing needs assessment that was done recommended that the town be involved in strategic planning. The town wanted no part of being involved with any sort of housing issues at all. Now we have a different entity that's coming in to conduct another study that has no relationship, I don't think, to the previous 3 studies that have been done since the
There is
1989.
there is some.
And you talk about housing issues. I have a clip from the Trail Gazette. It goes back to the 1960s. It says the most difficult situation in town is the 2- and 3-bedroom rental properties for employees in the summertime, because people want to come back and use the property. So you're right, we need to find a way to interact with other governmental agencies, but we also need to keep in mind the political process in our community changes every 2 years. The values of the town board shift based upon who's elected, based upon who the directors are in the various departments in terms of implementing.
Could not agree more. It's, you know, that the dynamics of government are tricky. And right now, I think we have an enormous opportunity. I like to take advantage of things like that. So I'm looking for every opportunity that we have to try and make a difference. And you know, I do, part of me, I think at some point we'll go back to this. And actually, when we start focusing on the built environment chapter and housing itself, we're going to talk a lot about this. But I do just want to let folks know that we have not seen a significant influx of people into Estes Park, and that's based on the 2020 census data. But what I think what that also tells us is what the people that we're not capturing, the data that we didn't get, is also very important for us to consider. And when I'm thinking about undocumented people that live here that are contributing not only to our economy, their kids are going to our schools, they are working the jobs that employers have, they are buying food here, they're shopping, they're doing all the same things that we do, but they're largely doing that in an invisible way. And we need to recognize they are a part of our community, an essential part of our community, and we need to figure out a way to help them to find safe housing. And that's not just, you know, year-round housing, it's seasonal housing. It's all of the things that we struggle with today that we've just kind of been like, I'm not really going to pay attention to it. It's peripheral, and it's not peripheral. I think it's very front and center. We face this all the time of trying to address where we find housing in places where it's not safe, where they have operated for decades under the radar in conditions that are not good, are not good for the people living there and not good for the town. And we need to start figuring out ways to incorporate healthier, safer, affordable housing that can cater to our seasonal employees.
The only point I'd clarify with that is, I would say we have seen some pretty significant population growth, because just from 2009 to present, our full-time population in the Estes Valley has grown by 20% and visitation has grown by 70%. That is a lot.
Oh,
more
absolutely.
people.
That was
Yeah.
going to be
And
my
that,
point.
and that even, I mean, in addition to the invisible side that we're not even capturing in that data. So I think we're under capturing it, and it's still,
Yes.
yeah, I'd say this problem is rapidly increasing as a problem, and our rate of addressing it is not changing.
If our visitation is increasing at that rate and our year-round residency isn't, that's also just, whether we've miscaptured, that's a problem. But if that's accurate, that's even a bigger problem to me, that we need to be growing as a community so that we can still be a community and not just one big motel.
I think you were
There's a
absolutely
difference in
right.
that.
Yeah, I mean,
Some of the invisible housing is employers providing places for their staff if they can. And so there's no unit sitting there that we can recognize in this process, but it's there just because during the summer especially, so they can use it.
yeah. And so a lot of what the consultants are going to be doing with that housing needs assessment is trying to get at that data, really trying to dig a little bit deeper than just what we're seeing from the census, but what else is out there and what's really happening at a very granular level here in Estes Park. How are these issues being handled? Because I agree with you. I think a lot of employers, they're trying to take actions to address their own needs. And people get very creative with trying to figure out, how do we do this, especially during the summer months. You know, we're looking at some strategies too, ways that we could potentially make it easier for employees to be able to live up here. One of the things that our staff is looking at is, can we allow employers to have employees stay on their sites in RVs over the summer in their parking lots? And this is an interesting idea, and it's something that we actually have a local example. The town of Uray is doing this,
That's
and
what Jackson Hole had. This is our new employee housing, and they show a bunch of RVs sitting in a parking lot.
yeah, and it's not, I mean, that's not
Better than just
ideal.
Living in a car.
Yeah,
Yeah,
better than that.
better than living in a car, better than camping.
Something that happens a lot in Estes, I think, that I don't know how we can track. There's a churning effect. People come and go. We're here for 2 or 3 years and then they're gone. And I think that makes up half of the population. I don't know, I'm just pulling that out of the air. But a lot of our population is, I mean, they're not transient because they're here, but they're here for
Temporary.
just a few years. So I don't know if the population is growing or not, but it's changing constantly, I guess. Is something that-
That's a good observation.
Another
And I
comment.
think that reflects the town boards.
Comment about the housing too, or the town board. I think that now there's more willingness on the part of the town to engage in housing and childcare. You know, we had the committee that was put together, and Travis led that process and came out with a report and so on. I think in the 2016 plan, there were some things indicating that the town should be more engaged, but I think there's maybe more willingness now. I would agree with that. For sure. So take advantage of that.
Yeah.
You know, that means the public part of the public-private partnership may be a bit stronger now than we've been.
I certainly can attest to that from my end, that the commitment is not just there, but we're here. We are doing as much as we
And when
can.
I first moved here, I remember that hands-off kind of approach around 2010 or so, that it was still very much that way.
Well, and it's, it's tricky because we have a great relationship with the housing authority. We also, I think it's important as this evolves, we have to really figure out, how does the town help with this? Does the housing authority need more? Do we need more? And a lot of this is really specialized kind of expertise that needs to come in. I'm not a housing planner. I know enough to be dangerous, but I've never, worked on financing and some of the complicated structure that you have to have. Just as much as, and I don't want this to be all about housing, but I think this really speaks to front and center. This is one of the critical issues, but I mean, even when it comes to issues about sustainability is a very complex, knowledge base full of all kinds of things. And you want to have people that are really well informed and are educated and have experience with that to come in and help us to solve some of these problems. We can't just take things at face value and say, oh yeah, we can take care of that. It's much more involved.
And that's where I'd say, I think, while I agree that our local government may not be the entity that's the most efficient, for 20 years, we've hoped that the private sector would solve this problem, and it hasn't. And so at a certain point, if it is a community value, then I think it is important for the community to take a role in solving that. And that might be through commitment of resources, or like by making it a priority, then we start to address it. That doesn't mean we have to become the experts in it.
Yeah.
But I think we can't just keep hoping somehow solves
Here's
the
the thing
problem for us.
with hoping, we weren't relying really on the private sector to solve the problem. They have regulatory barriers in place to really stop the private sector from doing anything about it. So, I mean, if there's no multifamily zoning, you can't build your way out of it. So there's no incentives for the private sector. So I don't know if we're really
Well, I think,
hoping for them to solve the problem.
Well, we weren't solving it. So like, hope was the closest thing we had to a strategy.
we're gonna
So
have to
anyway,
work together.
Which is not a great strategy.
So anyway, eliminating some regulatory barriers to allow the private sector to operate.
Well,
That's something.
And I don't think we'll get to the point of specifying what we want to eliminate, but set some direction. If we do these things, we will incentivize multifamily housing, either through some incentives or through making some land available, making the economics work better for the developers such that it can happen. So
You've seen
we'll
that.
set some directions like that.
You've seen that already. I mean, with Westover development, wildfire. Took advantage of the employee density bonus and the heights bonus. They're creating 80 some units of employee housing. We've got another project going in at Lexington Lane. It's gonna be 90-some units. The housing authority took advantage of the height restriction or the. We were able to double the density strictly for workforce housing.
Smaller ones like Grant Estates.
Yeah, the developers by and large, the major developers by and large left town. During the 2007, 2008 economic downturn, the subs left. They went to the Dakotas and choose the oil industry. So we've lost a lot of just general basic people to build the infrastructure, or not just the infrastructure, but to build the developments that we need to take advantage of what we have. And David's right, there's still a lot of regulatory issues that get in the way. There's zoning issues in particular.
Charles, you had a comment.
Well, a couple of things, getting back to what you're talking about and getting back a little bit to your comment about this strategic plan coming in place. You can have an implementation plan. If you don't have anybody responsible for implementing it, it ain't gonna happen.
Yep.
Because I've been through many of those before. We got a nice plan laid out and everybody's going, it's not me, we got a mayor, we got a town administrator. And I noticed, I think in either the 16 housing plan or maybe an ad hoc 19 housing and that. And there was a comment that the assistant town administrators would be responsible for keeping up with us. So I got curious. I went back to the strategic plan for 2022 and the budget. You know, there are multiple pages long. I didn't read through the whole thing, but it wasn't obvious to me that there was any comment in there about, you know, who's in charge. We need to have, you know, we're the shoulds, as you said here, not the shalls. But I think we probably need to think about it. If we're gonna get something done, somebody needs to be responsible for it.
Mhm.
That needs to be clear.
Yeah,
And somebody needs to hold them and every year sit down with them and say, did you accomplish what we needed you to do? If you didn't, should be consequences.
yes.
Yeah, that's the way it works.
We're gonna get the towns, we're gonna get
Yeah,
the
who's gonna get the
stockade
bonus?
in the front.
The person you sell to.
Well, to that point, one of the things that's encouraging to making sure things happen is tied to the money that is funding this plan is also the implementation of the development code changes.
Yeah.
And there is some accountability and action that has to be taken,
Mhm.
and it's tied to money. That's gonna drive some of that accountability and make sure it occurs.
The implementation plans, the current comprehensive plan that was adopted in 96, almost 30 years ago, that had a pretty strong implementation chapter. And it worked. It created a whole new zoning code, not just for the town, but it worked across different agencies. I mean, that got the county involved and everything as well. So it had a good implementation plan and it worked.
I think,
It was a growth restriction plan and it helped get us where we are now.
yeah.
But that's, you know, besides the point, the implementation plan did work, so.
Well, and one of the things that, you know, obviously our development code is going to be only for Estes Park. And, you know, I'm very, very invested in what happens here in the town because this is the community I work for. I don't work for the county. It's going to be really important that we partner and that we think carefully about what that partnership actually looks like. But there are different opinions. And I think it's really important that we recognize people have different thoughts about growth, whether you're inside the boundaries or not. And, you know, this plan, the comprehensive plan will reflect that diversity of thought. But in terms of what Estes Park is going to do, we'll have our marching orders and we'll be proceeding with that, with the development code update. I'll also tell you that I'm not just waiting for the development code to start implementing new ideas. We have been, you know, our downtown building height code ordinance amendment was just changed. So we now let people go up to 40 feet.
And they're all out there ready to do it. Oh, wait a
Well,
minute.
actually, there are several businesses that are out there contemplating
Are
that
they?
actively
That's
right
good.
now.
Yeah.
So I think, you
There's
know,
a structure removed on Cleve Street.
I'm sorry.
There's something that came down on Cleve Street.
Yeah. We
With
have
the
a,
intent to,
Yeah, there's just a hole on Cleve Street.
I know that there's,
Unless they're planning on.
I know there's such a desire to like, let's see things happen. Well, things take time. We actually only approved the downtown building height, what, in September?
Yeah.
And we are already seeing developers saying, here's what we want to do. So there is cause and effect.
There's some economic feasibility for certain properties where it just wasn't feasible until the height. And now they know what the height is. Now they've got, the plans are in place. We're seeing them come across our desk.
Yeah.
And they can be more fire safe.
And not just
That's
that,
where
but-
I've spoken in favor of the height going up from the fire perspective,
Yeah.
because we're gonna tear down buildings that are not anywhere close to code and replace them with things that are up to code.
Yeah. And
So
we can bring more
better
housing in.
than burning them down
Is
and
it?
replacing.
I think
So
that
I
works
like
as an example as to what we can propose and try to make happen in this plan for the next development plan or development code, is that exactly what we did in downtown Height, that by creating the ability to do something more, you can do it better. You can be safer, you can solve more
More economically
community needs,
efficient.
more economic needs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you remove
economies of scale.
government obstacles to private development.
Yeah.
Is this, it might be, you might not be able to say anything, but are you seeing any movement on maybe residential development downtown?
We are, yes,
Okay.
and
This is the extra height. I'm talking
yes,
about.
yeah. There are a couple of businesses that are contemplating that right now. And, you know, like I said, especially in our downtown, if you're an owner of one of those buildings, you've got a lot of challenges right now. There are lots of things with those buildings. They are aging. Structurally, they may need a lot of help. And really what some of the challenges were is we're not going to build it back if we can't build back more. And so what we're really
Or
hoping
maybe
to
even build
see-
back less than you had before. so
Possibly,
that's-
yeah, and what we're gonna have to see is this, did we put the right treatment down to welcome that kind of change? And if not, what else do we need to do?
So
that's
that's
where
an
we are right now.
example of an aspirational thing. If downtown height had not been done already, and we got to the end of our planning, we would have something in there to encourage the additional height downtown. So it's that kind of thing that can come through our plan and then can guide some of these strategic plans each year. Okay, well, that was in the comprehensive plan, so yeah, let's try to do that through the planning commission in the next cycle.
Yep, and I think that with everything, and you know, there's more to come. We have more, I'm scheming all the time, so don't worry, there will be more things coming. But what comes with that, and I think what comes with what I'm hearing in this discussion, what I'm seeing in the surveys, what I'm hearing from the community is we need things to change. And what I will warn you of, if things are going to change, we're going to have a different structure. And we're going to have to get people to come together to compromise on some issues that in the past seemed sacrosanct and that we were not going to touch it. We're going to have to touch some issues that people might be sensitive about.
Well, I can definitely speak to that, having been on the planning commission, particularly outside of the town, but also inside the town. Anytime you want to change anything residential and allow more density, you're going to run into significant opposition. So how we do this or how we propose to do it is an important aspect. of it.
Yep, and we also did just approve like expanding accessory dwelling units, so that also just happened in January.
Yeah.
You know, little by little, we have to take,
We
there
saw
are
the
tools.
opposition there, right? There were some people who wrote in and had opposition to.
oh, there were a few.
Yeah.
I got a couple of comments, yeah.
But interestingly enough, there was less opposition this time around than there was like 3 or 4 years ago. And it was brought up when we had the canyons closed, and if this was a crisis, we need accessory dwelling units now, and it died.
Mhm. I think that is not unusual. Some of these things are hard pills to swallow for a community, especially when there's a mentality that things have to stay the way they are now, and they
This time
can't.
around, the discussion was better, more involved, and people, I think, could see how this might really play out, rather than their worst nightmares of how it might happen.
I mean, we all have really active imaginations.
But don't forget the older folks who live outside of town, who will be within the 3-mile limit, who will oppose anything we want to do to change.
Yeah, and I think that's really where we start talking about, there's a distinction between what the town does and what the county does. And we'll try to we need to find that balance with the in-between.
Because housing, if you're going to develop, well, there's more land out there and outside of town.
But
There's redevelopment perhaps within the town more than outside.
yeah, and I have to say, again, I'm not interested in going outside the town. I want to stay in the town. I want to focus on the challenges that we have here, rather than that extension of utilities and infrastructure to build more single-family homes. Because if that's going to be what makes people feel comfortable in the county, that isn't addressing the issues that we have in town. So we have to really get creative about that. And again, if there is going to be any movement beyond our boundaries, that's going to require a lot of partnership and a lot of collaboration with the county and with the communities that are being affected by that.
Because I live out there, I think that is a very important part of this plan. Is that collaboration and even setting some direction for what happens in the county.
Yep, and it will be here. I think just to clarify a little bit what we're going to be doing, and I know it came up and you probably saw it in the discussions about this concept of a growth management area or a service area or a growth management boundary. We're going to talk about that, and we'll keep it at a very high level with the comprehensive plan. Actually, when the IGA was dissolved in 2020, in those discussions, it was determined that we needed to create an annexation policy. So that annexation policy is not going to be in the comprehensive plan. It's going to come most likely in the development code, but we're going to be working with the county to try and figure out what that looks and feels like.
Would our plan have a philosophy of annexation in it?
It will probably have a philosophy, but it will not have a specific policy direction.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that the plan is not for policy for sure, but it does need to put a priority on creating that.
Yep.
The fact that we don't have an annexation policy is like,
We
heard that.
we do have an annexation policy, by the way. It's an annexation policy with the county. But we already have criteria. If you want to annex it and you're a property that's outside the town's
I guess
jurisdiction.
maybe policy is the wrong word, annexation strategy. Because I think we heard that from either, town administrator Mahalik or assistant town administrator, that there is no strategy for annexation, right? At least from my notes from when either of them came to talk, that's when people come through. And so to me, like the importance of having a strategy, like we can encourage that, right? I think it does obviously, I think when I've talked to, people about that, it's like the cost comes up like utilities, but I think like I live in the county, I have full city utility, full town utilities, right? Like, it's like, sure, it's seen as a cost to annex more, right? So like annexing like where I live, but like, then it also like gets rid of some of this like, well, there's county and there's town, and it's like kind of this weird polka dot thing on the map. And like, it does put more power behind the town in driving what we do with the plan.
Yeah,
right?
although, I mean, I'm not really as interested in symmetry and just making sure that things, that there's consistency. What it really comes down to is, does the town want to take on a residential property, and knowing that there's not a lot in it for us, except more work and more maintenance and all of those things. And
But there's more opportunity for our code to exist in those areas. And if we're
Yeah.
saying we're here to create the like regulations and code to make better development for the Estes Valley, and we're saying that that is anti potentially with some of the county, what the county's directives are, and we should potentially like look at that, right? And we say like we should have a strategy that says like, we should have an annexation strategy that actually encourages smart growth in the Estes Valley for these 75 things that we have as a priority, because like otherwise we're going to continually come into this like regulation challenge with the county. At least that's what I'm hearing, right? Because like it seems like the county is doing one thing and the county's doing something else.
I think what's happening is a reflection of the different priorities. And
Yeah.
I encourage you to get involved in that process and to learn more about it, because it is contentious. And there are very different philosophies about who wants to do what and who wants to commit. I will tell you, just if a property has a failing septic tank or a failing sewer, well, and they need to come into the town because they need access to utilities, we can do that. We don't necessarily need to annex you in, but we can bring you in to make sure that you have access to safe water and sanitation. It just really depends on where you're talking about. And really, is it the prerogative of Estes Park to be developing in areas where, first of all, there may be consequences when we talk about wildfire hazards or flooding hazards, or
That's a
any
good
of those-
example of where we need a plan that stretches over the entire valley and not just Estes Park.
Yeah, but this is
Fires
not gonna
don't,
be that
fires don't
plan.
know boundaries.
Yeah, and this is not gonna be the plan that is gonna answer all those questions.
When we first started this process, I thought we answered the question, but this was going to be a comprehensive plan for the Estes Valley. That's what people wanted.
It is,
Okay, that means we have to take into account the area outside of the Estes Park, the needs and the priorities of those areas in our plan.
we are looking at that, basically the valley planning area that is included within our boundaries.
Essentially, that's the entire valley. If you do the 3 mile limit, and I wouldn't eliminate out 3 miles, oh, this little piece of property here right next to the edge of the valley somehow is not within the 3 mile limit. I think we're doing a plan for the entire valley.
To some extent, we are, and sorry, I'm David, I'm swearing.
Okay, if you disagree with that, then we're back to square one. What are
I'm
we
not
doing here?
disagreeing with you, Bob. I think you're, please don't misinterpret what I'm talking
You just
about.
don't want to be put into a box with an annexation agreement.
Well, I'm not going to commit to anything. This is not my decision. It is not, we are not going to decide this in this room.
No,
So
but
that's,
we at the beginning of this process agreed that this was going to be a plan for the Estes Valley.
it is Bob.
Okay, as long as you guys agree with that, we're fine.
I think
But I still think we're not on the same
I,
page.
I think that might lead to the next discussion here, which is the role of this committee a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, the next topic here that I want us to get to.
Yeah, and I
As
know,
well.
yeah, I know that, Matt, you need to go. So let
Well,
me,
I just need to drive it. but-
the one thing I just want to call to your attention is let's just revisit this map. This is the same map that we continue to look at. I know it's a little bit hard to see here, but if you follow my cursor, this blue dashed line here is the Estes Valley planning area. And this is the area that the comprehensive plan is examining.
Which
So hopefully
does-
that answers your
it does
question.
essentially take in, it does essentially take in the whole Estes Valley.
There will be parts of it that are going to be very specific to Larimer County and how Larimer County wants to address it within the valley itself.
Right.
There are going to be parts where Estes Park and the county come together and we have some shared partnerships and collaboration in the plan. And there are going to be parts of it that are specifically and exclusively Estes Park. That is the stated need that I have heard from the stakeholders. That is how we're going to be moving it forward.
And the committee, I always forget the name of the committee, but it's the Estes Valley Planning
Planning
Committee.
Advisory Committee. Mhm.
Needs to be, they have been, and we continue to need to have them a part of this process.
And they will continue to be,
And they feel like they want to be too.
and they are.
Yeah.
So there's no drama. We're
Yeah.
all involved.
So, and that gets us back to annexation and that whole discussion.
So we're not going to talk about annexation in the comprehensive plan beyond just really, this is how we want to move forward with it. We're going to tackle that later. We don't have time. It's a tricky process that we all need to be on the same page with. And that means Estes Park and the Board of County Commissioners in Larimer County. We have to come together to work some of that stuff out. And we do not have time to do that in the next 6 months. So that, and it's also really outside the scope of a comprehensive plan. That is a regulatory kind of policy piece that we need to suss out separately if there's going to be an IGA. All of those nuances, I am 100% on board with, and I think we should do that. We are not doing it in the plan.
Is there any
consideration of a philosophical statement to the effect of reconstituting the Estes Park
No,
or Estes Valley plan?
there is not, and there will not be.
I think the kind of language we've used, we've put out there as priorities is to continue intergovernmental work,
Absolutely.
things of that sort. I'm going to agree with Jessica on this point that I think making a hard recommendation, bring back the IGA or something of that sort is beyond our scope in my mind. I think
It is.
the language stating these entities should be talking and working together and there should be a collaborative effort is very important.
Absolutely. And-
Going
and-
beyond that is probably more than I envision for this committee and for the plan itself.
Well, it's
Comp
too,
plans
it's
are
in the
for
weeds.
goals and broad objectives, not for the policies.
Yeah,
That's
it's-
what I'm
yeah.
saying. So that comes later. This
I-
sets up
I
the
do agree
framework
with
for
that.
the conversations around the annexation agreement.
Yeah, that's deep in the
It's more of the
weeds.
aspirational aspect of how are we going to facilitate this working together,
Yeah, and I think we're on,
which
we
is
are,
back to what Don said earlier.
Yeah, and we're on a great path right now. And I think that things have been working really well. In fact, I think our next 2 meetings that we're gonna have are gonna be joint meetings with the Estes Valley PAC. And the intention is anytime that we can do things collaboratively and invite the groups to work together, we want to do that.
Right.
Now, as you all know, physically getting people together is really challenging. So we're gonna have to figure out how we can do that because I haven't been able to get all of you into these meetings together in person yet. And we need to start doing that. These interactions are really critical. So that's another challenge, but I want to make sure, just so we can wrap up this discussion about summary, which I know we talked a lot about housing. I know that that's a really important consideration. It's things that not just you, we're worried about. Everybody's worried about this. It is front and center. So we will be, like I said, I will bring the consultants back who are working on the housing needs assessment. They will probably have a discussion with the CompPAC, if not just you individually as stakeholders. So I'll let you know as that plays itself out. It'll be happening within the next couple months. But I think your observations and your thoughts about this are really important.
I was gonna mention something. In the area of wildlife protection and habitat assessment, there is something that's going on there where I think the the contract has been modified, so they're gonna start looking at spending a little time on the habitat needs assessment we had in 2008.
Yeah.
And some updating of that or
Yes.
something.
Yeah, we've been trying to work that out. So Leslie and myself have been talking with actually Logan Simpson, who is going to help with that. I think largely the county is going to help to facilitate that. It's really going to be it's not going to be a complete overhaul of that plan. I think what they're going to be doing is augmenting it with some additional data. Just because it could be a very expensive thing, or it could be something that's pretty targeted. And I think we're going for something targeted. But yes, that is coming. I don't know where it is in the process right now.
Okay, yeah, I heard about that from Frank Tice, as a matter of fact.
Yeah,
He was
it's-
talking to him.
Yeah, actually Frank was very instrumental in wanting to see that updated. So it was
And I
a
am too.
great
I'd like to
suggestion.
see that part of our plan.
So that will also become a component of the comprehensive plan too.
Okay.
So there's, you'll see a lot, there's a lot we're trying to pack into this.
Mhm.
But I just wanted to take a moment and talk to you a little bit and just try to share, because I've heard the question a couple of times, what is the role of the CompPAC? What are we supposed to be doing? How do we do it? And so really the first place I went back to, probably the most logical place were the bylaws for the CompPAC. And so I just wanted to take a moment and read these to you, and then I can send it out. I apologize it wasn't in your packet. I found it a little bit later. I can probably actually try to find it if you'll indulge me for just a moment. So on our website, if you even just go to boards and meetings and go to the CompPAC, what you're going to find is a copy of our bylaws. And so this was adopted. That's kind of surprising. I guess we made a couple of tweaks to it. I don't remember what it was. But this was actually put in place before I joined you, when Randy was leading this effort. And I don't know if he spent a lot of time talking to you about this and really, what your role was, but there were 4 very specific items that are called out here. I'm just going to read them. So serve as advisors in support of drafting a comprehensive plan by giving overall guidance to the process and ensuring ample public participation and specialized input in the development of the plan. That is also representative of the different backgrounds that you have, the different stakeholders that you represent. We were trying to really seek that diversity. Consider issues, review data, consider alternatives, discuss ideas, refine vision and values, advise staff, planning commission, and elected officials, and make recommendations to those entities and the community regarding goals, policies, and strategies being developed for the plan. Be a link to the community at large by sharing the planning process with acquaintances, colleagues, and communities of interest in the spirit of information sharing and outreach to different segments of the community without biases and prejudices to the outcomes. And during the comprehensive planning process, the CompPAC should strive to maintain compliance with applicable standards and requirements from DOLA, for the grant award contract and with applicable state and regulatory requirements for advisory committees. I don't know if that provides any clarity to you, but really the idea is, and I'm sure all of you have been tapped to sit on other advisory committees and commissions in your time here. But really the point is that you're helping to guide and advise as we move through this process, and that helps inform the planning commission when they make a decision and the town board when they ultimately approve the plan. And I appreciate that there's a lot of language in here about how you can help to connect other members of the community to this effort. And that's a lot of it is that, you know, and we've talked about this, and I appreciate everything that you've done to really talk to your friends and neighbors, invite us to meetings, talk to different groups, and really try to get creative about how we get the word out. That it's a really important part of this process. Does that help to provide some clarity for what we do here? Or do you have any other questions that I can help with?
So there's state law too that says that a planning commission will be formed and it shall have the responsibility of developing a comprehensive plan that shall be then adopted by the governing bodies for that area. So we're feeding into that, but at some point the town planning commission and the Larimer County planning commission will have a role.
Yes.
And that's not really specified there, but that's kind of, and in practice, I think advisory committees do, and town staff do a lot of the grunt work of getting a comp plan done, because the planning commission usually doesn't have the time or
Yeah, it's not in there.
the bandwidth
Yeah,
to do
it's
it.
not in there. It's not really a function of them.
But I remember when I was on the planning commission, I was wondering how that was going to play out, because we started this process and then it kind of aborted. So
Oh,
I'll say, so I'm one of the links to the planning commission here directly. I'm on the planning commission. Sometimes when I look at this in two different ways, when I'm a planning commissioner and we're working on a code change, something of that sort, I'm never quite sure if we're accomplishing what the town board wants. And ultimately that's the town board decision. And having that level of communication, there are times I speak directly to the trustees, or we've had some joint meetings. Those are really clarifying moments for me as a planning commissioner. I view this relationship of this committee with the planning commission a little similarly. And other than me sitting on both entities, we haven't had a whole lot of communication with the planning commission to ensure we're going to feed them a document that they will approve, right? I think that's an important next step that we would be getting to as we're getting to this language now, but it's one I have less concern about that because I sit on both boards, but I've been wondering how the rest of the committee has been perceiving their role and relationship in dealing with the final plan. This is an advisory group. We have a lot of opinions here, which is great. To a certain extent, be really careful when I say this, those opinions don't matter. And that's right. They're ultimately somebody else is making the decision. And as a planning commission member, and I can't speak for the rest of the commissioners, but that and the town trustees, the idea is to take that feedback and make those comments matter.
right,
But if we're not having that communication,
we aren't.
do
Yeah.
you feel disassociated with that process? That's been one of my questions, I guess, that I haven't directly expressed.
Okay, so a planning session with the planning commission would be a good thing with the town and the county later on.
we're going to have, there'll actually be a joint meeting between the planning commission and the town board on July 12th, I believe. So
That's the planning commission and the town board,
Yeah.
but this group doesn't have a role in that.
other than please come.
Yeah. So I wondered if the planning commission and our group here should have some discussions at some point to familiarize them with what we're doing so that we don't just bring them something on the last day. Now, you'll be familiar with it.
And the commission's been getting updates.
Yeah,
as to
I
this
update the
process.
commission
We
every
talk about
month.
it every meeting we have
Okay,
at planning commission level, but
Yeah.
that's is part planning commission level.
Yeah.
You've got the EV planning advisory committee doing similar things to what we're doing. And I am less familiar with than how the Larimer County Planning Commission is involved in that.
Yeah, that's Leslie's purview. So Leslie is the one that's doing that. thank goodness I don't have to deal with their planning commission too. I've got enough on my plate.
I'm just trying to think ahead, figure out whether we're covering all the communication links that we need to be making along the way.
I think we're trying to do the best we can. If you have
We don't
other
have anything on the
suggestions.
table yet, so once we do, those groups should probably be looking at what we're thinking about.
Yes, to a certain extent, but we also have to a certain extent, we can't be feeding them things that they're gonna be prejudging
Well,
in
yeah.
advance. They need to know
Things
where
in
we are.
draft form have a problem that way.
Yeah.
So, I know, I'm just trying to figure out where we're headed.
Yeah,
I'm comfortable with the arrangement. We're doing what we're tasked with. We're providing advice to that committee member right there, that planning commission.
Yeah,
So,
I'm
yeah, I think we're right there.
I think where I'm hearing that the communication is happening, that needs to.
I think so, but I want to make sure that that's agreed by the members of this committee too. And I think the other that this outlines to me is that link to the rest of the community. And we're talking about outreach and what staff is doing with these meetings. I get the sense that all of us are talking about this in non-meeting time with our neighbors and other people in the community. Just from how we discuss it here, I think we are providing that link. This is really what was tasking us with that in the first place. I think that was important.
if you have other suggestions for how we can do that, I mean, it's difficult enough, and I want to acknowledge what the CompPAC does. Meeting twice a month is a lot, and these are lengthy. There's a lot of information to process. I'm reluctant to bring you into more meetings. I think really the point is, I want to be that conduit to bring information back to the planning commission. I want to respect your time, but this is an open process, and any of you are welcome at any time. If you want to discuss things with the planning commission, make a statement, submit comments, please do. I want to encourage that. And if you want the planning commission to know something, or you want to ask them, let me know. I think that is absolutely an open dialogue.
Are we gonna have, when we get into the tough discussions, are we gonna have that facilitated like we one time talked about with the restorative justice, or is that?
Yeah, no,
That's gonna happen.
that is actually, and Eric back here is with the library, and Eric and Denise Lord and myself, and then 2 community volunteers, Sally Park and Susan Stewart, have been talking and planning for our event that we're hoping to have late July, maybe the first week of August, where we are going to be working with restorative justice on this community conversation. So that is another thing that I'm working on, and we're working on to try and make sure that we can get the word out on that.
Okay. I don't know if this group would have difficulty in some of this, but on the planning commission early on, we had a discussion about consensus building and how you go about that and what your attitude should be as a committee member. And it was, everybody respects everybody else's opinions. You don't always agree with them, but you will support the group's decision. You can walk out of the room and say, I support this. And that's only a bit of it, but there's a whole part to that discussion that maybe we don't need to have that. But at some point, when you get into disagreements, significant disagreements, you have to figure out how you do consensus building.
That's exactly what our restorative justice conversations are. It's about consensus building. So I encourage you, please, I'll be bringing back information once we have the details on that worked out, which will be soon. Please participate and bring your friends. Bring your friends. And if they want to argue, let's argue. And let's get to the heart of some of these issues. And really the idea is let's bring different perspectives together so that we're not arguing in a vacuum.
So I feel pretty confident on what our role is. I think the piece that I've been struggling with is we've been meeting for a year. When are we going to do something? Like, when are we going to actually start to write this stuff down and say, this is the plan we can have to debate and discuss and now tweak and improve? Because as we started the conversation with, we can't take 5 years to do this. We got to do something. And because we all came to this with some ideas about what we thought were priorities. And I think there's been really valuable discussion and lessons and things, but that's the piece that I'm unclear on is
So
what are we doing?
Yeah, and I would expect that to come from John. So
Yeah.
it's as a fellow.
Sorry to jump on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe I was
so
reading his mind.
the first thing I will do is, is just frame it as if, we can get something done really quickly. I'm not gonna get your opinion on it. I'll just do it. So if you want action, I'm all action. But I think what's really important is that we have to take this through this process.
Yeah.
As I think I had mentioned this before, but the last plan that I wrote took us 4 years. That was fully funded and we could take as long as we wanted. And we did. We took 4 years. We have essentially a year and a half to do this, and we are 6 months away from a deadline that is quite hard. So I appreciate everybody's impatience with this. I think it's important to be a little impatient. We have to get there, and what we've been doing to this point is getting there. We have been on schedule, we are on track. All of the deliverables are exactly delivered as planned, which is kind of amazing, considering everything. So what comes next is we're diving into the plan itself. So each of the chapters, as I just mentioned to you, I've already got a copy sitting in my inbox that came yesterday afternoon of the beginning of that. So what that typically involves is Leslie and I and the consultants go through a bit of our own internal review, looking at it, making sure, does this make sense? Do we have clarity? Then we bring it to you. We'll bring it to the Estes Valley PAC. You guys will have a chance to take a crack at it. So what I will tell you is get used to reading a lot of data, because you're going to be seeing things like this. And I'm going to be coming to you and saying, what do you want to do about it? What do you think about it? What are your comments? And then what we're going to do with that is take it to the public and say, this is a draft. What do you think of it? What are your comments? Because it's not baked yet, and we need to get those comments before it's baked.
So by next meeting, or is it the first meeting of July, we're gonna have some content to look at?
Oh, you're going to have content even before the first meeting in July, I guarantee it. So the next meeting we have is on June 23rd, and I'll be bringing you probably that first copy of the draft, so you can take a look at that.
Or sending it to us prior to the meeting?
Yes, I will. Yeah, I'm not going to just bring it here. I apologize. You'll get a copy of it in advance. And if it's possible for us to send it out to you any earlier, I will try to do that.
Yeah.
I know it takes a lot to get through some of this, and I think they are not doing, they haven't gotten to built environment and housing yet. Those are chapters that they're going to take some time to put together. So there may be some of the other chapters that are coming that we can look at that are a little bit more attainable, a little lower hanging fruit that we can get off and start getting to the public to start vetting that as well. So I know I've been warning you about this, it seems like for months, but it's here.
Right.
And it is going to take a lot of effort. So if you have any questions about it, again, as soon as I have it ready, I will send it out to you for your thoughts. Edit it, redline it, or love it. Tell me what you think of it. We want to get that feedback. Yeah, absolutely. I think that was it. Oh, yeah, so that's primarily our upcoming schedule. So we will continue to meet. Obviously, I know it's always a challenge trying to find a place for us. This is always a great location, and thank you, David, for offering it. It's the other place that we can go to is just right across, go to the museum. That's another good facility where it's a little bit less kind of a parking challenge. You don't have to pay for parking, all that good stuff. And the facility lends itself well to the technology. So we may have meetings over there too. And I know that I had already said, I know that there are some members of the CompPAC where it's tough to come here in person. It's tough for Leslie to get up here in person. It's a long drive. So I understand that. I know that it's hard to be here when you've got other stuff on your plates, but we're going to try to meet in person as much as possible.
So I understand there's other factors, but if we wanted to have a Zoom option, we have the network, we have the OWL. And we could, there's aspects of that could be facilitated somewhat straightforward, but how you get engagement in the same way is certainly challenging.
Yeah,
I
and
appreciate that.
yes, and I think just looking ahead, and I have to go back and look at the exact dates, but those joint meetings that we want to have with the Estes Valley PAC, it may just be better for us to be virtual because we know we're going to get more people that can come. So I'll look at that, but and I'm sorry if people don't agree with me. We either are going to be live or we're going to be all virtual. We can't do a hybrid. It's a decision that was made above my head. I understand that there's a lot that goes into making a hybrid meeting work, and it's tough. So I will be looking at that. Any opportunities where we can do it virtually, we will. Anytime where we can get folks together, it's a good thing too. So
Hopefully COVID will not rear its ugly head again.
I know, and I know that's a big thing right now too. So
Several friends have friends of friends have it,
Yeah.
So
it's,
Hopefully it won't hit us.
Are we live next meeting?
that's the intention. So I'll go back and look, because that may be our first joint meeting, so I will let you know one way or the other. If we can get the Estes
9
Valley back
a.m.?
here. 9 a.m., yeah,
Sticking with that. Okay.
same time, 9 to 11, every other Thursday.
It's kind of early.
And as of right now, the
Well,
space is available for
yeah.
those, so I'll keep it blocked on the calendar. If it makes more sense to be virtual because we've got a large group. We'll keep the space available for this meeting.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that.
I'll try to park at the parking structure and walk over next time, but
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. If we didn't have donuts and coffee, we would totally.
Yeah, feel free to let the Bureau know that we'd like to expand our parking without another NEPA study.
You
Yeah.
think
Cat
we're
X,
bad? Yeah.
Cat X, that's
Yeah.
what the term you're looking for.
Yeah.
is there other direct business we need to be discussing right now?
Just got a question. You said something about July 12th.
Yes, that's a joint meeting between the planning commission and the town board. So that'll be a study session. We will post information on that, but primarily what that's going to be is the consultants are going to be making a presentation and kind of an update to both bodies. You're welcome to join that, or you can also watch the play.
Is that slated for 5? Do we know you
I
time yet?
believe, I think we're trying for 5. I have to go
Okay.
back. I can't, I'm sorry, I can't remember if we had other items on the agenda, but it'll be between 4:30 and 5.
Now, is that related to the housing strategy?
No, that is just a
It's a joint
it's a comprehensive plan update. The housing stuff I will let you know when they've got meetings scheduled. And I think what they're going to try to do is schedule, they may be individual stakeholder meetings, but I'll be talking with those consultants soon to try and get an idea of when they want to do that. And I'll bring any information that I get to you. So you can know about that.
And those are in person in the boardroom or 202.
Yes, the study session will be in the boardroom, in person. Yeah, like I said, I think it's at 5 o'clock. So, yeah, please come if you would like to. It'd be great.
Right, I think it would be a good one, actually.
Yeah,
I'll
it's,
try to-
I mean,
I'll try to make it.
I know you guys don't think so, but we've covered a lot of ground. You really, really have done a lot. Even if you don't think you have, you really have. You should be very proud of yourselves. And I'm very appreciative of everything, all of your efforts. This doesn't work without having a group like this, so.
I think it goes both ways. We're very appreciative of your efforts and Leslie's efforts.
Yeah, I know that we both want to be more. It's always hard. We want to be everywhere. So if there is, again, anything I can do, let me know. I would love to talk to anybody that you have ideas. Get connected.
All right. Thank you all. Thanks for making it here in person too.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
You made it to your 10:30 time.
Yeah, close enough.
Is that specific?